And I'm very excited to talk about this message. This is a message I've been working on for 24 years almost. And you're getting the latest iteration. I have ADHD, so my talks are never the same every time. But hope God speaks to you today. The church has been going through this faithfulness journey, and I think God, how he's been faithful in the past, he's faithful now, be faithful in the future. Today we're going to talk about faithfulness in coming close. And it's a story of the incarnation, it's a story of Christmas. I know it's August, but it's a really big event in church history and world history that Jesus came close. And so we get to explore that in maybe a slightly different way than we do this next Christmas season. So you can kind of be reflecting on your Christmas season after you'd heard me talk about today, because it's very Africa-influenced time. But it's basically a story, the Christmas story, God coming close, is that of light coming to dark places. Those walking in deep darkness will see a great light. And the Christmas story came at a time when people have been waiting. There have been nearly 400 years of silence, prophetic silence. They were a people in oppression. They're people dominated by one of the biggest and most brutal empires in human history, the Roman Empire. And they've been waiting for a whole long time. I'm an American. I want to fix things quickly. I got educated, and I had people like you praying for me, and I just thought I could change the world really quickly. And I have learned over and over again that some of the most profound changes that God does, he's doing secretly in dark places, like the story of Christmas. It was very, very, you're waiting for the Messiah to come, and it's not this big army that comes and invades and kicks out the Romans. It's like a little baby boy born in a little forgotten place. No press corps. They got some angels, but those were the shepherds. But just really, really hidden. And so we need to learn to be attuned to what does that light and darkness. Not all the darkness we see has no hope in it, and hopefully we can explore some of that today. This is based on John 1:14. The Word became flesh and lived among us. That lived among us is a very charged term. It's actually tabernacled among us. So the tabernacle is this tent. It's a mini Garden of Eden symbology going around in a terrible world with lots of wars and famine and terribleness. But there's something about God's presence is walking around with the people. Then it gets solidified into the temple, which is not there anymore. But that was like the place where God was in his fullest, the Garden of Eden that later becomes New Jerusalem. But that's another sermon. Is walking around, but then somehow this presence of God going around appears, and he puts up his tent among us. He walks among us. But he starts out by being a little crying baby. He didn't walk for a while. He was a little crying baby among us. And there's something about this God that comes down, that comes low in the story of Christmas that I got to see. And there's places in the world where people still live in tents, kind of like they did back then. But this is a story about God's character more than anything. God, when he displays his power, all the other religions have, beautiful buildings. Some of them are kind of ugly, but a lot of religions have beautiful buildings. They have ecstatic times. They talk about beauty and all this kind of stuff. But none of them speak to the kind of character that our God has. And our God has that character, and he displays that very powerfully in the Christmas story. I remember my first Christmas when I was in North Africa. This was 25 years ago when we first went out, and you were supporting and praying for us. This was a city. This was our home. We had 19 rooms in our home. Of course, we had 60 neighbors in those 19 rooms, and so we had 2 of the rooms. We shared bathrooms with them, and we were trying to get down low. And I think some pictures earlier, but on Christmas Day, I put on my best local clothing, my feast clothing. Back then, I could comb my hair. I combed my hair. I went out. I was going to go outside, and this was the day that Jesus was born, that Christmas day, back in 2002 would be the time. And I walk out onto the street, ready to celebrate Jesus, and I look around, and this is exactly the view I had at that time. Nothing was happening. All the shops were open, kids were playing, trucks were going by, and nobody seemed to understand that the greatest person in human history had showed up, that God had come close, and they didn't know. And I was filled with sadness at that thought, that they need to know and they don't. And I come from a Christian culture where we celebrate a whole lot more. We have this notion of the baby Jesus in the manger, and I used to really get annoyed. Like, why do we have such pretty mangers? It was such an ugly place. But then it hit me that pretty mangers are good as long as we remember where it came from, because God took what is terrible in an ugly manger and made it really beautiful. And now they have works of art that's actually kind of cute. It makes it give you Christmas feelings even in August. We celebrate with lights, we celebrate with presents, all this kind of stuff. We are a Christian culture. I grew up in Argentina, and we celebrate with asado, really good beef, and we get together outside, and there's fireworks, and it's warm and it's hot, and it's a totally different kind of Christmas, but we still celebrate. We're a Christian country. Did I mention the meat? The meat is really good down there, and Christmas meat is the best meat down in Argentina in the world, and I've tried. It doesn't work. It's the best down there. And we do that to celebrate Jesus because it's great. And different cultures around the world celebrate Jesus, and it's always kind of magnified. And this is Ethiopian, where I'm going to be in 3 weeks. And they, even there, a country that has seen poverty and famine, it's still very glorious with really nice robes on and stuff like that. And they don't know that you can celebrate it with meat. So I get back to that theme, anyways. But a lot of our ideas about Christmas can be a caricature. This is an actual caricature, and Jesus was probably not that lily white. He probably looks a lot more like my Arab friends, darker complexion and stuff like that. And it's okay. We all make Jesus into something that resembles who we are, and that is fine. But today I'm going to talk about why this may not be the most accurate picture. And something that's helped me think through this is talking to my Muslim friends and trying to think, if I was in their place, what would I think? If I didn't have all that Christian culture, either the Argentine beef or the fireworks or the presents and the lights and the Santa Clauses that we have here, if I didn't have that, or the foie gras and the stuff that we have in France that celebrates Christmas, if I didn't have that, and I was just stuck in some village or some city, what would I think if I read the Christmas story? What would my neighbor Mariam, who, even though we lived 2.5 kilometers, so 2 miles from, or 1.5 miles from the ocean, never saw the ocean because she was afraid of it, never got outside of this really small little world that she lived in. But if she was hearing the Christmas story without all the jingle bells, what would she see when she saw it? Islamic scholars, when they see the Christmas story, they rightfully so are scandalized. They're like, do Christians around the world not see what I see? This is terrible, what is going on. And they talk about it, and they're like, when we, Islam is a religion of beauty, really great art, some really beautiful mosques around the world, and for them, Jesus is a holy one. Jesus is the preferred one. Why would we put Jesus through the dirt? Why would Jesus be born in such a lowly, terrible place? They're scandalized. And it's good to let some of that scandal hit us because it's saying something. It's not a random scandal. It's not just Jesus saying, I'm going to go suffer randomly. Like, he's trying to communicate something. And he's not, one of the reasons, a lot of my poor neighbors in these neighborhoods don't pray to Allah, to God that's far away. The reason why they don't pray to him is because, he's busy up there. He can't think about me. So that's why a lot of them turn to witchcraft and incantations and curses and blessings, because those little lower spirits, they have time for me, and they can talk to God. But my kid is sick, so he's busy. He's up in heaven, and he's beautiful, and he's great, and he's so holy, he can't talk to a sinner like me. So you go to, you get your little voodoo thing going, and you try to solve your problems. And we offer something very, very different than that. But it comes through kind of a scandalizing story. Coming home from work one day in North Africa, this story really hit me in a big way. We lived on a street. These are my two kids growing up there. We lived on a street in front of a school. This was the street we were on. And in North Africa, you get to know sheep and goats. And the sheep are not fluffy, cool little cute sheep you want to hug. I never tried to hug this guy, believe it. And, trust me, this is ticks and dirty, and they don't get washed, and it's hot weather. So these are closer looking sheep to the sheep that Jesus probably dealt with. These are sheep and goats in our hallway from one of the homes we lived in. And I know Jesus couldn't have done this back in his day, but my method for telling between the sheep and the goats is when I'm in my pickup truck, which we had a vehicle for a nonprofit, and you see an animal in front of you, and you're not going really fast, but you're going slow. If the animal jumps, it's a goat. But if you hit it, it's a really dumb sheep because they're not very smart. And so that's kind of how I know that the Last Judgment, God will do the sheep and the goats. I hope he doesn't do the pickup method, but he could be. I don't know. We'll see. He's very creative. But anyway, so we had these sheep outside. They're dirty and they make noise, and they're very loyal to their owners, and they're really, really not smart. So when we are called God's sheep, it's not a compliment. We are not. It's just we got issues. So anyways, the school is coming out. Kids are getting out of school, and there's these. Our neighbors had buckets, and they washed their clothes in. But sometimes those buckets got old, so then they use them to feed the animals. And so we had a bunch of kids, and that was kind of nice. I'm not a kid lover, and my kids are now adults, so I don't like kids anymore. But I let them live. But some of these kids were a lot of fun in front of our house. But I remember coming home one day, and there was a group of kind of aggressive, kind of bullying kids. And I was watching them from afar. I was walking in about a block away, and I watched in front of me as a group of 4 or 5 of these guys are being really aggressive, and they're kind of picking on their like a younger brother or a younger kid. So they're like 12, 13, and they're picking on like a 7, 8-year-old and pushing him around and pushing him under the dirt and stuff like that. And then they look around, they're like, well, we want to really shame this kid. We really want him to feel terrible. What can we do? And so what they do, they grab him by his shirt, drag him across the street, and dump him in that barrel that you see in the background there. And that barrel is used to feed the sheep. It's a place of goat and sheep spit. There are cockroaches, there's leftover dinners, there's probably ticks, it's dirty, it stinks. Nobody cleans this thing. Sheep eat anything, but sometimes it's a little too rotten even for a sheep, and it just stays in there. And that little boy was humiliated. He was crying. He was not happy. He was dirty. He's like, falling down the street's one thing, but falling down in the place of goat spit, no, that's really shameful. So when Muslim scholars read the story of Christmas, they're like, do you guys really believe that when Jesus was born, you put him in the place of sheep spit? He's the most preferred person in history. God come close, and you put him in such a terrible place. You can't do that. And I've had people really, you explain the story, and it's just really rough. These are rough places. These are ugly places. These are not places where I never thought of taking my kids and putting them in a place of goat spit. And none of my neighbors ever thought of that. That's just not what you do. That is a very lowly place. And the desperation of the time of Joseph and Mary to have had to put their kid in the place where animals eat was terrible. And so, but the story continues to, especially from my now slightly African eyes, it gets a little bit harder. Mary, mother of Jesus, which, by the way, Muslims actually agree with us that Mary doesn't have a father. In Islam, Jesus is the only man or only person whose father isn't there, and he's son of Mary. Like Osama bin Laden is Osama, son of Laden, Well, Jesus is Isa bin Maryam, the mother's name. There is no father. So we have a common ground there with our Muslim neighbors, that Jesus has no father. And in the Arabic, when they talk about God being Jesus' father, in the Arabic, it's a very sexual term. So I tell my Muslim neighbor, well, I don't agree with, this is not a God doing a porn thing. This is very different, and I agree with you on that. So we have common ground there. And that word that you have is way too sexualized, and you shouldn't use that. I agree with you. I agree with, that's a scandal. God didn't do that. And so that's a common ground that we have. But Mary herself, back in Palestine, in Israel, she was most likely a teenage girl. She was illiterate, hadn't gone to school. She maybe had a loving family and stuff like that, but she was at the bottom of the list. She was used to a lot of manual labor, going for fetching water and doing chores, and she had a really, most likely, tough life. And she was really young and probably, potentially, kind of scared in a big, bad world. Joseph, her husband, he was a carpenter. Nowadays, we value hard work and contractors and people who work with their hands. Back then, that is the reason we value that is because of our Christian culture. And Jesus valued it, so we value it. And it's great to be a carpenter. My grandfather was a carpenter on my mom's side. And that's a thing I have with pride, down in Portland. And that's great. But back in North Africa, it's still considered a very low job. Barely get paid, very poor. And you kind of failed in life, so now you're a carpenter. It's not a good career to have. And that is the career that then Jesus went on to have as well. It's not very well seen. He was not in some palace getting some rabbi giving him great education. He was in a really bad place. One of the things that sometimes we don't think about is when Mary went from Nazareth all the way down to Bethlehem, which now you can do in about an hour on a freeway, that probably took 3 days on top of a donkey. And when my daughter was born, we were in Los Angeles, and we drove 25 minutes across Los Angeles. And every bump I hit, my wife screamed, and don't hit the bumps. I'm like, well, it's a freeway, and there's bumps. But imagine Mary. She's 8-9 months pregnant, for those of you who've been mothers, to sit on top of a donkey for 3 days while you're pregnant. That's uncomfortable. Mary was not, she didn't get the limo ride down south. She got a donkey ride, and she had to suffer with that. My wife can empathize. If they needed water, they had to go fetch it far away and maybe carry it on their head. It's heavy to carry water. There's no, plumbing or whatever. One of the things that I say, when Jesus was born, it was worse than your average African village. When you're in an African village, and I've been to quite a few, to go learn language and stuff. This is out there with my wife. If you don't go to the hospital, but you have your aunt, some ladies in town that have given birth before, they know how to comfort. They're comforting to you. They come around, and there's this unity of a village giving birth to a kid. Where was Mary? She was 3-day donkey ride from all those aunts and friends that could have helped her. I don't know who was there to catch Jesus. Probably not somebody very important, because then Jesus got put in the place of goat spit. Maybe it's just Joseph. I don't know. I caught my 2 kids, and it was a much better experience than my wife had. So that was fun. But Joseph may not have had the same thrill-seeking thing that I did. I don't know. But I just really enjoyed that. But I don't know. Not all men are made to catch their kids. But maybe he had to do it. There was no hospital. What did they cut the umbilical cord with? There's no anesthesia. There's no pain relief. There's no aspirin. There's nothing. It's just natural birth in a scary, dark place, far away from medical conditions. It's a really tough place. And if you look at the detail of this one, if you look really, really closely, you'll notice that back then they did not have electricity, and it was all dark. The sun went out, and it was gone. Candles are really expensive, and lanterns and all the torches that we see in movies, those are really expensive to maintain. And so when the lights go out, the lights go out. And it's really, really dark. It's a super dark place. And so you have to live through that with all your pain and the blood and the guts and all that kind of stuff. It's a tough place to give birth. Another interesting fact about Jesus, he is an African refugee. He fled to Egypt, which is in Africa. And so our Messiah was an actual, real-life African refugee. And they probably went to the Jewish community there and potentially got racist comments on being Jews in a pagan land because they're a little bit different and didn't get treated very well as aliens. I don't know what Jesus' experience was as a child, but that's highly likely that something like that happened. I'm sure not everything was comfortable about fleeing to Egypt and being a minority Jew in that country. So our Messiah was also a refugee. All this to say, when God wants to show his power of how he comes to earth and spends time with us, what does he do? He comes low in weakness. The world comes with pomp, with power, with guns, with millions. But God, in so many places, when he shows his greatest power, I mean, the universe is hinging, everything is twisting around this moment. It's the center of all of history, and it's a little crying baby off in a dark place that's defenseless, no bodyguards, no gates, just, some cockroaches maybe, some goat spit. It's a really tough place. I'm just, people invited to the party were shepherds. Shepherds couldn't Sabbath like other people, so they're regarded as less than in Jewish culture. And they're out there on the mountains, and they have to be with the sheep all the time. And they're the ones that get the angels to come to them. So the poor are invited to the party. And I'm just excited as a rich, big white guy from middle-class family and access to education and all that kind of stuff. I'm just glad that even though it was a very humble beginning, there was room for 3 wise guys. Now they were pagan, which is its own scandal, and they did witchcraft, or at least they looked at the stars. Right? They did astrology, which I don't recommend anybody do here, but they were invited to the party too. So there's a place for us rich people to come, and they gave gifts, and that helped a lot. And so God is, everybody has a place at the party of what he's trying to do. But they had to humble themselves and recognize it and see it and watch for it. And that's very, very important. Our Christian cultures tend to clean up this story, obviously. It's kind of uncomfortable. I mean, even our language. Jesus was born in a manger. Where does that word come from? Manger, it comes from the French mangeoire. If you eat in France, you mange. Je vais manger. I'm going to eat. A mangeoire is where the animals eat. But in France, a mangeoire is for the sheep and the cows. But Jesus, no, he wasn't born and put in a mangeoire. He was born and put in a crèche. A crèche is a very nice word. It's also the word for kindergarten, like a little school for kids. It's very, very, very nice. And so in the English language, even though manger is used for Jesus, when the cow's going to eat, we call it a trough, a Germanic word. A lot of the nice words in English are French origin, and a lot of the kind of rougher countryside words are Germanic, Anglo-Saxon origin kind of thing. And so Jesus is put in a rough place. And the same thing goes for Spanish. They cleaned up in that language. All our Christian languages are kind of uncomfortable with putting Jesus down where there's cockroaches and goat stuff. But we need to remember that's what actually happened. He actually was put in a very, very humiliating, symbolically and actually humiliating place in human history. And so there's more that can be talked about, archaeologists and stuff like that. Can go into more detail, and there's a lot. I love biblical archaeology, but that would require like a few days of classes to get into that. But for our purposes, the scandal of God coming so close is so important for us. So the incarnation has a message for us, and I have 5 points. There's many more. I've had to trim this down a bit, but the first one is that God is not afraid of the dark. God is not afraid of pain. He's not afraid of going to hard places. In fact, he runs to them. When he sees need, when he sees sin, when he sees the worst part of our lives, he runs to it. And the Christmas story is that of a God that even though he could stay in his palace, he is running to all the hard places. He's a God that's not afraid of being light in darkness. A lot of us think, oh, I need to fix my act up, and then later I can go back to God and when I'm better. But that's not how our faith works. That's how other religions work. You got to earn your points and do your time and show those gods or those systems that you're really good. And then maybe, if you're lucky, God will accept you. That includes my Muslim friends. If they work really, really hard, they might get into paradise. It's a maybe. We have the opposite. You do that, and you miss the mark. We win by giving up and letting God's light shine on us, and that's what transforms us. Not our hard work, not our works, not us showing God how great we are, but us allowing God to show us how great he is. And if we let him in, we let the lightness into our darkness, that's how we get it. People struggling with porn, the only way you're going to get over porn, I've had some friends of mine deal with it recently, the only way you get over it is allowing Jesus to be there. And he wants to be there in that horrible place. He wants to remind you, he's not happy about what you're doing to women around the world and all the human trafficking that goes on with it, but he knows what's going on, and he's more than happy to, maybe happy is not the right word, he wants to be in that place with you. Whatever point of shame, embarrassment that you have in your history, you are not so bad that he can't speak to that. And there's a prayer team here, and there are people in this church that love praying for people. If you have a place like that, to sit down and quietly invite Jesus to be there because he is not afraid of it. Please do not give yourself the prideful thing of being, I'm too bad to be saved, because the story of the incarnation coming close is God just running to all these hard places. He's not afraid of it. God's timing is not our timing. God sometimes works very, very slowly. And a lot of the greatest things that God does, he's doing them quietly and taking lots and lots of time. And as a fast-acting American that wants results, that's really, really been a hard thing for me. And our culture is getting even quicker on, I can order something on Amazon and have it in a few hours in some places, and we just want everything right now. And God does not work that way. He wants to work on us in the quiet. I'm an unrepentant Baptist. I'm a Baptist, but one of our problems sometimes, I have a lot of Baptist jokes, but one of our problems is that we have a hard time hearing from God. We have to wait longer than our charismatic friends, apparently. But God is doing something in that wait. And we need to accept that there are times of waiting, and those who wait on the Lord will see great things. But we live in a world that's very, very impatient and wants, I want poverty to end. I want suffering to end. And there's a lot of desperation out there. God's power is different. It's an upside-down kingdom. So different is upside down. He doesn't come in with armies. He comes in surprising ways. Something that really annoys me a lot in some places I've seen, there's this meme, Muslims are killing us and bombing us, and places like Nigeria and Pakistan, people are really suffering, and they're genuinely being persecuted. And so there's jihad. And so, I've got this meme that really troubled me. I see your jihad, I'll raise you a crusade. Well, crusades were one of our biggest mistakes. We tried to take, human ideas of power and dominion and go to the Middle East and take care of business. And what do? We just made the Middle East angry at us until today. And all the mess that we're seeing is partially because we tried doing this really dumb project here. I don't recommend it. We are to love our Muslim neighbors. We should be a joyful impact among our Muslim neighbors, not show our power and beat them up harder than they're beating us up. That is demonic, and it should be refuted in every church in the United States and around the world. God called us in Matthew 10:16 to be sheep among wolves. That is not, be the bigger wolf. But I thought, since we're in a time where sometimes Christians want to be kind of strong and violent, I thought, I play with AI, and I'm like, oh, what does a little crusader sheep, showing that wolf what it's like, look like? So, that was my first version. And then I'm like, well, that's just way too cute. So there we go, like a mean sheep, you know? Do you really think Matthew 10:16 is asking us to be this kind of sheep among wolves? But sometimes we act like it. And we want that. We want worldly power. There is when we win a battle, it's just really great. But we got to be very careful. There's a place for military, there's a place for violence, but we just want to be very, very, very careful with that. Because God's calling us to be sheep among wolves. And it's through our seeming weakness, but amazing character, because we're following a God of character, that we win in the long run. Another thing, incarnation, is God cares about the poor. I almost left my faith back in the 90s because I saw poverty around me, and I saw a church that didn't really care. And fortunately, somebody told me to read the book of Luke, and on every page, I could see that God cared about the poor. And I'm like, okay, this God I can follow. And so I was able to kind of see that actually God's character does care. He sees the outcast. And all throughout the Bible, there is over and over again, there is God. He sees Hagar. Hagar is the first person in the Bible to name God, and it's God who sees. And God takes care of Hagar, a poor slave Egyptian girl, on her way home, trying to escape home to Egypt. In Genesis, God sees the oppression of the Jews in Egypt, and he rescues them in mighty ways out of there. God, and when they set up the law, the Mosaic law has all this: take care of the orphan, the widow, the alien in your midst. Those are commands. And as soon as the people of God got power, then he sends prophets to tell them, hey, you cows of Bashan, you gotta, you're living in big, huge houses when other people are suffering, and you're doing it off of oppression. Be very careful. And we need to be very careful today. We buy clothes and we live off of labor that's a lot cheaper around the world. We got to be very careful in our current world. But I'm so glad that even while I may be making mistakes and compromising, my God sees the poor and wants to do something about it. And he wants to get down in there. He sees all my neighbors who definitely feel forgotten. He sees them. He doesn't forget them. And if I want to follow God, I also want to be somebody who sees and doesn't forget people in pain. And the final one is we have a God of relationship. This is not a God of projects. This is not a God of success. This is a God who seeks relationship. We kind of have this lofty idea of this God up in heaven that kind of looks down on us and has pity on us, and he's kind of tired of all our little pesky problems down here. But he's not like that at all. God so desperately wants to come down and be close to us. And that is not like other religions. I sometimes pray to a God that is up there. We kind of think, he's up in his palace. And, we're pesky, and so he'll send down his angels to take care of business, when they have time. And, because it takes a long time to get help and all that kind of stuff. And it's true that God is not a magic formula. You can't just say, do so many, Our Father prayers and God will answer. He's another person. But he desperately wants to come low with us. We have this thank God, he's in his luxury vehicle having fun, or like a limo. And I've sometimes wanted God to, up in heaven, just roll the window down and toss me some coins. Preferably, he has a lot of money, so $2 million. I got some projects, God, let's bring it on. It would be so much better if you just kind of tossed out some money, rolled up the window, and drove on. Wouldn't it? But then we lose the relationship. Maybe he doesn't give us $1 million, or the $1 million come after generations, I don't know. But I'm not against $1 million for ministry, but he's a God who opens a door, takes off his really Gucci, super heavenly outfit, puts on ours, and walks with us, listens to us, hears our stories, empathizes with us, takes on our pain. What other God does that? Find me another God around the world who comes low and wants to be with us. Did you know that the God's main goal on earth is not salvation for us. I'm an evangelical. But I don't think salvation is the main goal God has for you and me. It's a really good goal. The main goal is to, after he has saved us, have relationship with us. We have a relational God. Salvation is on the way too. When Jesus was dying on the cross, for the joy set before him, he endured the shame of the cross. The joy is relationship with us. He'll put up with all that cross and all that pain because the party at the other end is going to be so great. And he wants to walk with us and get to know us, and us get to know him. And that's hard work. And yes, he may not throw $1 million out the window, but we get his person. We get him. And that is so much greater kind of God than the God that this world offers. Now, I've talked about a lot of hard things today, and I realize that I don't want to ruin everybody's Christmas story because, like I said, God takes the hard things of the world, makes them beautiful. It's great to have a beautiful Christmas, but remember where that came from. But all throughout the Christmas story in the book of Luke, book of Matthew, there's enormous joy. The shepherds are full of joy. Mary has joy. Mary's Magnificat, when she's announced by the angel that she'll have a baby, she bursts out of joy. My heart magnifies the Lord. When Mary showed up to visit her cousin Elizabeth, the baby, John the Baptist, leapt for joy in her stomach. One of the ways we know that we're in God's kingdom and we're doing pretty well with God is when we see joy in hard places. Like the world can't do that. They need money and success and beauty to have joy. But we have a unique privilege of experiencing joy in the pain of the world. And that's a miracle. It comes by the Spirit of God in us. It's not natural. I came back really messed up from Africa back in 2004, and I had a Messianic Jewish counselor, and she was a very good counselor, but she's like, you have two problems. You work with Muslims and you work with the poor. Stop working with Muslims, stop working with the poor, and you'll be okay. I'm like, no, lady, you're supposed to patch me up and send me back. This is not good. So we had these arguments, and on one level, she was right. Like, if you get rid of some of the stressful things, and that's okay, you got to be wise and not just put yourself through too much stress. But there's something to be said for the miracle of joy in hard places. And that is a fulfilling life. The disciples, when they were persecuted, they were full of joy. We want to be people of joy in hard places. And you cannot experience that unless you're connected to the Spirit. And you cannot experience that unless you've felt that God has come close to you. I cannot tell you, go out and love the hardest places of Kent unless you have experienced God loving the hardest places of your life. So that's the first thing that you need to fix so you can get there. Christ came, he died for us. The ultimate incarnation led to this horrible, tortured death for the joy set before him. The only way we can understand the cross is by the power of resurrection. We want to experience the resurrection. We got to participate in his suffering. That's a Philippians 3:10 quote there. He has ascended to the Father. He is interceding for us at the right hand of the Father, according to Hebrews. And he's up there interceding for us because he knows us. He's been close to us. He knows our feelings, and he can explain it to the Trinity, whatever that, I don't understand. That's above my pay grade to understand all that. But he's up there, and he's looking down, and he wants to walk with us and be with us. Jesus, go back one. Can you go back one? There we go. Sorry, delay response. Jesus Christ, both at the incarnation and later at the cross, he is a reflection of God's glory, the exact imprint of his very being. When God wants to show his glory, he did shine at the transfiguration, so there's that shining part, but so much of it is a little defenseless baby in a dark corner of the world. So much of it is this grueling torture on the cross. He showed his glory by his character. This is a God we get to spend eternity with, not some big boss bossing us around for millions of years, but somebody who's so self-giving and so desirous to be with us and understand us and accompany us in our pain. He doesn't fix things as quickly as we want, but oh my goodness, his character. Please accept that character. Please accept that love. And let him into all those dark places in your life and all those dark places in Kent. We need to shine in that darkness. Amen? Lord, I just want to thank you for all these years of faithfulness here at Faith, for all the ways that people have given of themselves and have reflected your character in going to dark places here in Washington and sending people to dark places around the world. I pray that there would be new steps and new ways of learning that and leaning into you. And most of all, of recognizing your character and then imitating your character as well. Help us by the power of your Spirit to do what you did. Not because to prove ourselves as your children and somehow gain favor, but out of sheer gratitude and awe at your character and how joyful it can be. To show joy and hope and peace in dark places of this world. In the name of the Father who loves us, has created us, in the name of the Son who was born defenseless and died resurrected, in the name of the Spirit that empowers us to see all these things. Amen.